Joining us again this evening for Kroc Talk. It's not like we are old pros at this yet, but we're getting better. This is the 6th show already. So we started this in January, and here we are in June. Can you believe it's already June? And we're on our 6th one. So we have a few people in the audience tonight, which is so great. We love having them here. If you're watching us on streaming with us online, Lori is on the call there. She's moderating the whole evening. Give us a holler. Tell us where you're from. If throughout the course of the evening you have a question you'd like us to kind of tackle, throw that in the comments, and Lori will make sure that we get that. She's going to also be posting a few things to let you know about where you could get some of the information that we're talking about when we get to talking about the Salvation Army positions. We do have an email address, so she'll put that in the comments as well. So if you've got a comment or a suggestion for an upcoming episode coming down the pike here, we kind of have most of it planned, I think, for most of the rest of this year. We've got some different topics, but would love to hear what you would like to hear about on these discussions as well. We've got another couple great guests this evening, so we'll introduce them in a little bit. But we're talking about race relations tonight and justice, so that's kind of been a hot topic, obviously, in our communities and in the media and in everything that we're kind of dealing with. So we hope this is a really good, just frank conversation about it. Hope it will challenge you. I think it's going to challenge me. And we weren't quite sure how to open this up tonight, but we thought a good way of doing it is to let a video kind of talk for us. Just to set this up a little bit, this is actually a 3rd grade teacher. Her name is Jane Elliott. Back in 1968 is when this video actually takes place. So it's going to show...
Also, you should mention...
I know. You didn't let me say it.
Go for it.
We're getting there.
Go for it.
Back in 1968, and she did this with her students the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. That's what you wanted me to say, right?
That's what I wanted you to say.
Yes. See, that's how this all works. Tammy keeps me in check, so we got to make sure that we follow that. So, but it's a really great example of some of the harmful things that can happen because of racism or because of the judgment that we make. And it's about 6 or 7 minutes long, but we thought it was a great way to introduce the topic tonight. So this is the brown-eyed, blue-eye experiment that Jane Elliott did with her 3rd graders back in 1968.
This is a special week. Does anybody know what it is?
National Brotherhood.
National Brotherhood Week. What's brotherhood? Treat everyone as though he was your brother. And is there anyone in this United States that we do not treat as our brothers?
Yes.
Who?
Yeah.
The black people. Who else?
Indians.
Absolutely, the Indians. Many places in the United States. How are black people treated? How are Indians treated? How are people who are of a different color than we are treated?
They don't get anything in this world.
Why is that?
Because they're different color.
You think you know how that would feel to be judged by the color of your skin? I don't. Do you think you do? No, I don't think you'd know how that felt unless you had been through it, would you? It might be interesting to judge people today by the color of their eyes. Would you like to try this?
Yeah!
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Since I'm the teacher and I have blue eyes, I think maybe the blue-eyed people should be on top the first day. I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. This is a fact. The brown-eyed people do not get to use the drinking fountain. You'll have to use the paper cups. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. You ready, Laurie?
Brown-eyed.
She's a brown-eyed. You'll begin to notice today that we spend a great deal of time waiting for brown-eyed people. I don't see the yardstick, do you?
It's coming over there. Hey, mister, you better keep that on your desk when the brown-eyed people get out of hand.
Oh, you think if the brown-eyed people get out of hand, that would be the thing to use. Who goes first to lunch?
Blue-eyed.
The blue-eyed people. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us.
The way they treated you, you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything.
It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us.
What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting?
Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut.
What did he call you?
Brown eyes. They always call us that. Yeah, they keep calling us brown eyes.
What's wrong with being called brown eyes?
It means that we're stupider.
I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes. Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses?
I forgot them.
You forgot them. And what color are your eyes?
Blue.
Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses?
He forgot them.
He forgot them. Yesterday we were visiting, and Greg said, "Boy, I like to hit my little sister as hard as I can. That's fun." What does that tell you about blue-eyed people?
They're naughty.
The brown-eyed people may take off their collars, and each of you may put your collar on a blue-eyed person. The brown-eyed people get 5 extra minutes of recess. You blue-eyed people are not allowed to be on the playground equipment. You blue-eyed people are not to play with the brown-eyed people. Brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. They're smarter than blue-eyed people. And if you don't believe it, look at Brian. I use Orton Gillingham Phonics. We used the card pack. The brown-eyed children were in the low class the first day, and it took them 5.5 minutes to get through the card pack. The second day, it took them 2.5 minutes. The only thing that had changed was the fact that now they were superior people. You went faster than I've ever had anyone go through the card pack. Why couldn't you get them yesterday?
We had those collars on.
You think the collars kept you?
We just keep thinking about those collars.
Oh, and you couldn't think as well with the collars on. 4 minutes and 18 seconds. How long did it take you yesterday?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. How long did it take you today?
4 minutes and 18 seconds.
What happened?
One down.
What were you thinking of?
This.
I hate today.
How do you do? I hate too.
Because I'm blue-eyed.
See, I am too.
There's nothing, it's not funny, it's not fun, it's not pleasant. This is a filthy, nasty word called discrimination. We're treating people a certain way because they are different from the rest of us. Is that fair?
No.
Nothing fair about it. We didn't say this was going to be a fair day, did we?
No.
And it isn't. It's a horrid day. Okay, you ready? What did you people who are wearing blue collars now find out today?
I know what they felt like yesterday. I did too.
How did they feel yesterday?
Down. Like a dog on a leash. Yeah. Like you're chaining them up into prison. Like you're shut up and you're throwing the key away.
Should the color of some other person's eyes have anything to do with how you treat them?
No.
All right, then should the color of their skin?
No.
Should you judge people by the color of their skin?
No.
When you see a black man or an Indian or someone walking down the street, are you going to say, look at that silly looking thing?
No.
Does it make any difference whether their skin is black or white?
No.
Or yellow?
No.
Or red?
No.
Is that how you decide whether people are good or bad?
No.
Is that what makes people good or bad?
No.
Now you know a little bit more than you knew at the beginning of this week?
Yes.
Okay, now are you back?
Yes.
That feel better?
Yes.
Does the color of eyes that you have make any difference in the kind of person you are?
Wow, pretty sobering, right? Yeah. It's amazing to me how quickly those kids changed, just like this. And it was just a suggestion. And I'm hoping that when we get into this discussion, we can kind of pinpoint some of those suggestions that cause those same things to happen in our society. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. To kind of preface this, we want to just present some scripture to you, what the Bible says about different races, the things that we thought were pertinent. Of course, there's way more. These are just some that we picked out. The first comes from Genesis 1:27. We said, start at the beginning. God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Notice there's no description of who were created. They all were created, all human beings. Galatians 3, we actually had this verse last time. If you're watching closely, you're going to go, wait a minute, is this a typo? And it's not. We did it on purpose. So in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor they're male or female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. In Colossians 3, we read this. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you are a Jew or a Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters, and he lives in all of us. And finally, Revelation 7, verse 9, gives us a picture of the new heaven. And here's what it looks like in the new heaven. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, from every nation, tribe, people, and language. That's a picture of the new heaven, and that's just kind of the foundation we want to start with today, what the Word says about it.
That's great. And if you've been watching or if you've been tuning in for the last few months on this, we also like to present if the Salvation Army has a position on any of the topics that we're talking about. And there are some great ones here that we want to just kind of reference real quickly, and then we'll get into our discussion. The first one says this: the Salvation Army denounces racism in all forms. Racism is fundamentally incompatible with the Christian conviction that all people are made in the image of God and are equal in value. The Salvation Army believes that the world is enriched by a diversity of cultures and ethnicities.
Ethnicities.
There you go.
There you
go. Which is great, and it kind of references back to the verse that Tammy read in Revelation about it's all nations and all tribes. And so that's great. That's from the Salvation Army position paper on racism. And there's an actual website you can go to, Lori, if you happen to be able to find that. I think we've had it before, that you can see all of the positions that the Salvation Army has on different papers. It's a great resource, a great place to go. Number 2 is the very diversity of the church is the most powerful witness to the church's universality. You gave me all the hard words this time.
No, you picked it.
I did pick it. You're right. I picked it. Which, again, is kind of an indication of this is all about all of us here. It's not just one particular race. Number 3 says racism negatively affects everyone. The recipients experience fundamental rejection, disempowerment, and more. Perpetrators function from fear and ignorance and experience the natural self-loathing that comes from spreading hatred. Wider society experiences hostilities and reduced productivity. The collective contribution of every citizen is compromised, thus reducing national development and productivity. There is a lot in that little statement.
Yeah, and I think what we want to highlight on that is that not only are the recipients altered negatively, but this one puts that the perpetrators are as well. The perpetrators are as well because they develop a natural self-loathing. That's a pretty strong language.
It is and it talks about reducing the national development and productivity. Mm-hmm. So this is something that's at risk of reducing what we can produce. I mean, it's just amazing. And then the last one says this: the subtle nature of racism is such that people who are not consciously racist easily function with the privileges, empowerment, and benefits of the dominant ethnicity, thus unintentionally perpetrating injustice. It is important for the empowered generations, including those who inherited the culture of their forebears, to access their present circumstances and work towards just and equal communities. this is one of those topics that, as you look at the screen here and you go, well, what do I know about this? Here's this 50-something white male. I'm in the most privileged category that our country has, and yet I have a responsibility as well in all of this. It isn't just pushed off, and I have to be responsible for that, and I need to know these things. And so those positions from the Salvation Army are really exceptional when it comes to racism. And again, if you're interested in that, take the time to look at all of the position statements of the Salvation Army. There's some really great stuff in it. So I think we're ready to kind of get some discussion going here. We're super excited to have our two guests with us this evening. Lieutenant Ken Jones is our officer here at the North Corps in Omaha, just for a few more weeks. He'll be moving. His assignment is taking him elsewhere, but we got to sneak him in before he got out of town, just barely, because next month he would have been gone. So this is a great time to get him in, and so we're excited to have him here. And Madeline Moyer, who's not a stranger to the Kroc, spent some years working here, a number of years working here at the Kroc in the finance department, but now is, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to miss, this is a huge long title, Madeline. Senior Vice President, Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Security National Bank of Omaha. So, I mean, how do you fit that on your business card? It's a long title. But those are our two guests, and we're just going to start this evening and just let them tell you a little bit about their experience and who they are, and then we'll kind of get into our questions here. So I guess we'll do this the gentlemanly way. Okay. Lieutenant Ken, we'll let Madeline go first.
Okay. And do you want me just to start with the first question then?
No, you tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, be happy to.
Yeah.
So I'm born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. I am one of 9 kids, and I'm right in the middle. So I tell my family that I'm the well-adjusted child, and they are still laughing. If they can hear me right now, they're still laughing. My dad was from Mexico. Came here when he was 21. Met my mother. Both of my parents are full-blooded Mexican. And so I was raised that you treat everybody the same. We all say we grew up very poor, and that was the truth. I think that we all knew we were poor, but we had those things that mattered. We had a roof over our head, we had food on the table, clothes on our back, and 2 parents who loved us. And so to us, we were probably pretty rich, although to everyone else, we weren't. And, I was thinking back as I got ready for this talk tonight, I wish that I could tell you that I haven't had racism right in front of me, thrown at me, had things said to me, and I have all of those things. But what our parents taught us is that you treat everybody with dignity and respect, and that you don't know where they're coming from, so you don't judge them. And so I started the workforce when I was 17 years old. Actually, before that, I started my first full-time job when I was 17, but I worked to pay my way through a Catholic high school. And my parents taught us that you work hard, nobody owes you anything. And so I've lived my entire life that way, and I'm not afraid to work hard. But what I realize is that, and I realized that at a very young age, is that you do get treated differently, especially being a female in a management position. There's a lot of racism that is thrown at you just because you're a female in a management role, let alone be a minority and see how that actually gets doubled. But here's the thing that my parents have always taught us, and that is that if someone does an injustice to you, you don't judge, you don't know where they're coming from, you don't know why they feel that way, you don't go to their level, you be kind, you treat them with respect, and maybe you show them that perhaps they were wrong about whatever it is they're thinking about you. And so I live my life that way. I deal with customers all day long. I manage several employees, and our customers come from every walk of life. And so I feel like I've dealt with lots of different cultures my entire life, and I treat everybody with respect. It's that old saying, you treat people the way that you want to be treated. And I guess I'll end with, I have a wonderful husband. I have an amazing daughter who is a physician here in Omaha. I have 2 amazing little grandbabies, and those are the things that we teach them. And they're at that age now where they're starting to figure out, Gammy, why is your skin darker than Mommy's? So, I'm having conversations with a 5- and 7-year-old explaining why Gammy's skin is a little darker. And then I have 2 stepsons. So this is home to me, and I'm happy to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I'm Kenneth Jones, originally from Detroit, Michigan. So moving to Omaha, as a prerequisite, I had no idea what Omaha was, right? So when they announced during our Congress and our commissioning that, we were stationed in Omaha, I was thinking like, do they not know that I'm black? Like, I thought that all Omaha was cornfields, right? Like, ignorance is bliss. But coming here, I really felt this sense of home, because this inner city and the struggles that I experienced and witnessed and ministered to here in Omaha is quite similar to where I was raised. So I was born on the west side of Detroit, and that's important because if you're in Detroit, it's the west side and the east side. I have friends on the east side, and we make fun of each other. It's like, oh no, like the east side is better, the west side is better. West side is better, obviously, because of me, right? But yeah, same with poverty. I fit every statistical stereotype when it comes down to a young black man. Single parent, mother, father's not being around, poverty, in a place where drugs and prostitution and gun violence played a huge part. And as a kid, I never really understood it and really had a foundation of what racism looked like, because it was more so trying to survive the next day, right? And even when it came to poverty, didn't really understand what that looked like, because you just know what you know, right? So it wasn't until I got older when I began to break down the layers of racism and poverty and even the structure of my home and how much lack of stability I had as a young kid. And I'm grateful to the Salvation Army because it was able to fill in so many gaps that my home just wasn't able to provide. And when it comes down to relations and race, I was kind of one of those kids where I understood what racism was, and I understood as being a young black man that there's a stereotype that I fit. And I've always lived my life as to say, prove them wrong, right? Like going against the grain. I was the first out of 4 kids to graduate high school. And I'm the middle child, so I claim that middle child thing. Like statistically, middle children are the most successful, so I'll claim that, right? First one to get married, the only one to get married, the first one to have it and only one to have a college degree, checking off those accomplishments. And that's kind of how I carried myself, like prove them wrong. But as I got older in life and when I finally was able to get outside of Detroit was when I realized, like, the reality is I still fit this mold, and I remember as a young adult, whenever I would go to stores, I would always keep my hands behind my back. And that was because I just wanted, it was almost as if I had to show that I was not coming in to steal anything, right? Like, and I comfortably was put my hands in my pocket. So even when I'm looking at stuff, I felt uncomfortable touching it because I would always be watched. And I remember being at the seminary college just a couple of years back, and we were doing this experiment. I guess it was like a ministry where we go in different types of diverse areas and we kind of identify different things. And I remember coming out of the store and my friend said to me, or my session mate said to me, he's like, man, did you notice that woman was staring at you this entire time? I said, no, like I wasn't, right? But like that's kind of how I've always tried to carry myself, is like prove them wrong. Like what the stigma is, what the stereotypes are, like prove them elsewise and prove that like not only me but others do not fit that mold. And so I'm kind of excited to talk about this because I come from a kind of a blended family. My mom, she's mixed, she's part German and African American, and so somehow I didn't know this, but I carry a redhead gene. So I actually have a daughter who's redhead. And when she first came out, I was just kind of shocked. Like, wow, like how did that happen? I almost wanted to like rub the hair to say, there's something like, but yeah, my wife is white, so we're a biracial couple, and I think racial tension and relations really came to fourfold because it now no longer is about me and how I can carry myself because I've been through it and I kind of have a tough skin about it. But it relates to my children. There's several conversations. We'll get through it in those conversations, but it made me really realize that, like, it's really important to build them up as individuals because already they have this white or black type duality between them. Like, oh, when one dance, we heard conversations and comments like, oh, she got rhythm. That's the black in her, different things like that. And we joke about it, and it's silly, but it really makes you think about how much, racism play in our society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am really excited about the discussion because, from my perspective, I grew up in small town Nebraska. There was really virtually no diversity within the school system that I grew up in, and even where we were serving before we moved to Omaha, very little diversity. And then all of a sudden, 4 years ago, we come to Omaha, and I'm plopped into South Omaha, which, is one of, I think, the most diverse areas or communities of Omaha, because it's just a really big mix of diversity. So, and I have struggled with that as, again, being in that category of a white male in his 50s, how do I make sure that I honor everyone and I treat them equally, and I don't let some of those things that we've kind of grown up with or that we've known all of our life be a part of it. So it kind of leads us in, and you both have shared a little bit on this already, but what are some of those experiences with racism that you've seen? You're talking about holding your hands behind your back the whole time you're in a store.
Right.
I would never think to do that. I would never feel like I had to do something like that. But I'm sure there's tons of stories you can share with us on that. But, can you highlight a few of those for us?
Yeah. Ladies first.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I wish that I didn't have all these stories, but there's two, and I'll be quick because I want to make sure that we hear from Ken as well. But when I was in high school, I was asked to a homecoming dance, and that was a big deal. And he was, white, and I didn't think anything of it. And he told his parents that he had asked me, and I remember his parents finding out that I was Mexican, and he had to unask me. And here I am, I'm a junior in high school. Everything's a big deal when you're in high school. And I remember coming home and just sobbing and crying, and my mom asked me what was wrong. And I said something to her, and I realized on that moment how much I hurt her, because what I said was, I wish that I wasn't Mexican. And I remember the look on her face and her telling me, and her crying and telling me never to be ashamed of who I was. But everybody knew that he had asked me, and then he had to unask me, and he felt terrible. And but you don't forget those things. So I don't hold on to them because I'm bitter about them, but you don't forget them because they have a mark in your life, and which direction you go, I feel kind of sets you on either the right path or the wrong path. I have a saying that you get better, you don't get bitter. And so I remembered that, and I remember apologizing to my mom because I knew how much I hurt her. And but there was a part of me, I meant what I said. And then I got into the workforce, and I always thought that I was protected there. I always thought that, this is a professional setting. Things like that aren't going to happen to me here, and boy, have I been wrong. And so, not at the company I'm at today, but at my former company, I was working late one night, which was very common, and the phone rang, and we didn't have caller ID back then, so I picked it up thinking that it was my husband, and it wasn't. And it was a lady who I'm guessing was probably about my age, and this was several years ago. And she was just as shocked that I answered the phone that she was on the other end. And so she said, I have a couple of questions for you. I'm really unhappy with my current bank, and I'd like to move. And do you mind answering a couple of questions? Well, I wasn't going to tell her we're closed. She knew that already. So I tried to get her name because I like to use people's names when I'm talking, and she would never give it to me. And that couple of questions turned into about a 45-minute conversation. We had a wonderful conversation, and this was a Friday night. It was very late. I was going to be working the next day, and I answered all her questions. And then at the very end, we're getting ready to hang up, and she said, oh my goodness, you've been so kind. I have just one last question to ask you. And I thought, oh, okay.
I'm worried.
Yeah, well, I wasn't, totally caught me off guard. And she said, I've actually heard a rumor about your bank. Well, no one had ever said that to me. I'm in the heart of South Omaha. By the way, they call South Omaha the melting pot because of all the nationalities. Right. And I said to her, no one's ever said that to me before. I can't wait to hear what your rumor is. And she said, I hear that you cater to a lot of Hispanics. And if that's the case, now she has no idea because we're on the phone. Right. So she has no idea who she's talking to. And she said, if that's the case, then I cannot bank there because, they just assume put a knife in your back before they do anything else. I can tell you It was back in the 80s. I felt like when I tell the story, it feels like it was yesterday. And I remember, I'm sure that I must have gasped just a little bit. And I thought, oh my gosh, what do I say? And she said, is that true? And I have to remember that I'm answering the phone on behalf of the bank, so I'm a representative of the company I work for. And then I remembered my mom and my dad saying, you don't treat people like they treat you. And so what I said to her was, I said, well, ma'am, if you're asking me if Hispanics come to our bank, yes, they do. And so do Italians and Germans and Polish and African American and Sudanese. What I'm trying to tell you is that anyone who comes to our doors is welcome. So you have to decide if this is a bank that you want to bank at. I said, I'm working tomorrow. I already told you. And by the way, throughout the conversation, I asked for her first name numerous times, never got it. I said to her, I'm working tomorrow. I'm the branch manager. I would love to be the one to open your account. And I meant that. And she said, oh my gosh, you have been so helpful. You've been so amazing. I'm sure that I'm going to see you tomorrow. Now, I knew 95% of my customers on a first name basis, but we were so busy that next day. I looked every chance I could to look for someone who I did not recognize coming in, but we were just too busy. So you asked me if she came in. I don't know. I'll tell you what I think. I think she did come in. I think she asked for me. And when she saw me, she left. Now, here's the sad part. I don't think she left because of what she said. I think she left because of what she saw. Because what I realize is that anyone who could say those things to someone over the phone and not have any idea who they're talking to, they don't care. I didn't tell anybody about that conversation for a really long time, and the first person I told was my dad. And my dad said, why didn't you defend yourself? Why didn't you tell her who you were? And the reality was, I had to remember. It's okay. I had to remember.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to it. Makes me feel like I'm at home. Makes me feel like it should be happening. And you know, the reality was, if I would have done anything to reinforce what she already thought, I would have only made it worse. And she would have hung up on me and probably said all kinds of nasty things about the bank. And so what I hoped is that what she might remember is that she talked to someone who was Hispanic and who was kind and who took 45, 50 minutes of her time when the bank was already closed and answered every one of her questions and knew what she was talking about. So I don't know if I ever changed her mind. I know my dad was really disappointed that I didn't stand up for myself, but I had to explain to my dad that I was answering the phone on behalf of the company that I worked for. They wouldn't have been thrilled if I had, not been anything but pleasant, and it wouldn't have changed anything. And so maybe, just maybe, I changed her mind a little bit, but I'm never going to know because she never called back, and nobody opened a new account that day.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm grateful that the foundations that you built on help maintain that, because I think that's one of the unfortunate things about being minorities is if you have to have the tougher skin, right? You have to be the bigger person. But that's something that we just have to take pride to, and being able to prove them wrong. Scripture talks about heaping coals of shame. So I was trying to think through actual stories because, as I said before, you never really understood it until you look back and it's almost like this layer of onions unfolding. But I can recall being a high schooler, and I was walking to the store one evening, and I just remember just taking a walk. I wasn't one of those kids that dressed, the cultural way. The only reason why I had bigger clothes is because we had a lot of hand-me-downs. So I wasn't wearing big clothes, and I just thought that was also how, I used to, I thought that was the actual size that I would wear. So I remember going to stores, and I was a little scrawny kid. People used to call me Noodles because I was really tiny and long, or orangutan because my arms would grow longer than my legs, and so I could touch my knees without bending down. And so I remember looking back, and I was like, man, why did I get extra large shirts? There's no reason. It was like a blanket on me. So I just remember going to the store, picking things up, not really thinking anything of it. Then all of a sudden, the police just runs. It was almost as if they were going after someone, like a high-speed chase. I mean, the tires go, and they stop right in front of me and a friend of mine. They say absolutely nothing, but just yells and say, "Put your hands up, put your hands up." And I'm just thinking, what is the problem? What's the issue? says nothing, put your hands up. Next thing you know, they're like checking us. And they're looking inside our pants, like looking everywhere with flashlights. And then they just leave and pull off. And I'm just like, what in the world? Like, everything of me just got violated. Like, what in the world is going on? And another story, I just remember a lot of encounters that have built like this barrier within me to be protective and just be cautious. And it's to the point where, like, even going to, like, whenever we're going on road trips, I always stop at gas stations that are more familiar, right? Like the big truck station spots. And I always look for different minorities as a way to feel safe, because I could just recall so many times stopping in small towns, you know, and stopping for gas and just getting that look, right? Like, people just looking at you, you know, with just that look, like, what are you doing here, you know? And so it kind of built that awareness of, like, you have to be careful, you know? And I even recall times where I like, being in the city, I was used to gas stations being open 24/7. Like, that's like one thing in Detroit that I knew of is, like, Coney Island is life, gas stations is 24/7, and there's bulletproof glass everywhere. And so I remember going to the suburbs and I was trying to get gas, but the lights was off in the store, but the lights in the gas station was still, or for the tanks was still on. And I just remember going in and trying to get gas, but obviously I didn't know that you couldn't. Next thing you know, cop pulls her over, comes behind me and says, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to get gas." He's like, "Well, like, you're not supposed to be here. Like, do you not know where you're at?" And I just remember, like, man, like, what in the world is happening? So it's kind of those things that you experience and you say, okay, like, for me, I'm like, how can I prevent that, right? Like, how can I be better so that I don't feel like, you know, I'm part of that statistic or I fit in that stereotype? But the reality is there's nothing I can do for myself to not initially get that type of reaction, because as we all know, like, those types of discriminations and biases are deep within.
And is it okay for me to ask how old you are? Because
Yeah.
I would like to kind of give us a time frame as to where this, like, when you're high school, or what decade are we in here?
Right, yeah, we're talking about 2008, 2009.
Yeah, so we're not talking that long ago,
Yeah,
right?
just about 10 years ago, 10, 11
And
years.
so we can't say, oh, it's like that was an old-time thing. We can't say
Right.
that. It's present.
Right. Yeah, that's something that my wife never really understood, because she was like, whenever we go to the store, or when we're on road trips and she'll stop at the gas stations, early on she would stop at the gas anywhere, because, you know, she's white and she's not really thinking much of it. And she's just always asking, "Do you have to go to the bathroom?" I said, "No, I'm fine for now." But then when we go somewhere else, I'm like, "Man, I have to use it really bad." She's like, "Why don't you go to the bathroom?" And it took me a while to really, like, help her to understand, because it's not like I was protective against her. Like, I really didn't understand. And then that's when I had those conversations and say, like, I just really don't feel comfortable when I go to small towns, because these are the type of experiences that I had. And I'm grateful that she listens and she understands. And so now, you know, when we go through those long stretches of, you know, Iowa, where there's, like, nothing there, you know, just trying to find those big truck stations, like, she's aware of that, and she, you know, she consciously think about, like, where we should stop.
Is that something you teach your children then?
Not at the moment, because they haven't really had those types of interactions. We've had conversations as far as, like just who they are as an individual, and we try to build them based on their character. Our oldest, who's 4, she doesn't really get that yet, but she's beginning to understand, like, okay, like she'll say sometimes, like, "Daddy, you're darker and I'm lighter," you know, or when she's coloring, she's like, my wife is funny because she has a little blackboard and she drew a stick figure, and she looked at it and said, "Daddy," because, you know, it's like it's a darker background. So they're beginning to break those down and be able to understand, like, the different types of skin tones.
Yeah. So where do you see, you're kind of telling us some you know, specific experiences, but just like in the video that we saw earlier, and there was just sort of this suggestion that blue-eyed people are better today, you know, where do you see that kind of subtle racism happening in day-to-day life?
I mean, I see it all the time. You know, I watch sometimes, I work here in South Omaha, so we have several of our staff that are bilingual and not. And sometimes if I'm paying attention, I'll see a customer come in and I watch them where they'll go, which line they'll go into. Or if I see 2 of the tellers are talking to a Spanish-speaking customer and they're not a Spanish-speaking customer, I can see them get offended. I can see them not like that. As the manager, I've had customers come and ask me, they don't need to be speaking in Spanish, and they need to be talking in English. And I remind them that we have customers that Spanish is their primary language, and if they feel more comfortable to speak in that primary language, then it's okay. They can do that. So I think that it's okay to say something. You don't need to be mean about it. We talk all the time about being kind. That's the world could use a lot more of that right now, unfortunately. And what I've learned, though, is when I see things that are wrong, I'm going to say something. I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to say it in front of a group, but I'm going to say something, because if I see that our employees are made to feel less than, if I'm made to feel less than, you'd be surprised at things that people say. And, they're subtle. Sometimes they're real big. Sometimes they're very subtle. Sometimes it'll be, I don't want to talk to her. I'd rather talk to him. I don't want to talk to, it's those things that you see happening. And, you asked Tami about where this comes from. And here's what I realize, especially now stepping into the role of diversity and inclusion for our company. By the way, that is the first time they've created that position. I am the first person of color to go into that position. And it really speaks volumes about our owners, because like you, they're white male. I didn't say it. They said they were privileged, and they wanted to do, they knew we could do more, and they knew we could be better. But here's what I'm learning. People think that you put someone in a role and all of a sudden you're going to go to a class and training and poof, you now know everything there is to know about diversity and inclusion. It doesn't work that way. All of us, everybody here, everybody watching us, everybody, I like to say people are a product of the table that they grew up at. You have some very deep learned habits, whether from the people that we love, whether they were our parents, our grandparents, our siblings, aunts and uncles, whoever raised you. A lot of those learned behaviors come from there, but I'm also a person who believes that those can be changed as well. But you have to be open for that. And so I think that, and I also took some training recently, and I learned things that I never learned in school. The systemic racism that exists and that has gone on goes back so many hundreds of years more. I learned things that I knew. I paid attention in history class, and I never learned those things. And so it's been really eye-opening for me to be in this space, and we're never going to be done. We're never going to be done. If anyone thinks that we're going to have, that we're going to eradicate racism by the year, whatever, that's not going to happen. But we do need to remove some of the biases that are out there and the hatred, and realize that those things that set us apart, we probably have a lot more things in common than we do that are different about all of us. So I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to fix it, but I know that we make strides every day at work to make it a place where everybody feels valued, heard, and welcomed, and that people can come and be whoever they are, and bring, we like to say, bring your authentic selves to work. But it's out there, and I think that if you thought about it, I heard someone the other day explaining their demographic, their footprint, and I know this person because I know her. I know she didn't mean to say it the way she said it. What she said was, someone asked her about her footprint. Tell me about your customers. And she said, well, we're kind of, we're not real high-end customers. We have a lot of minorities. She said that in front of a group of people. Half of the people in the room were minorities. What do you think they felt? I know she didn't mean it the way it came out. She was simply trying to say, it would have been better if she would have said, our footprint has a lot of female minority-owned businesses. That's okay, because that's a fact. But what she said was, before she said that, was that we're kind of in a, not a very high end. You just put every one of those businesses down. And I had several people who called me to say, that really upset me. And so she didn't mean it that way. I know she didn't mean it that way. And so I had to have a private conversation with her to say, words matter, and they're very powerful, and you have to think about them. So
yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest thing for us in a lot of this. I mean, one of the very first broadcasts we did here, we talked about living at peace with each other, extending that grace. And I think this particular topic is probably one of those that we have to have a lot of grace for each other, because there's so many things, as you talk about it, and I think, how insensitive is that to think that, oh, well, how dare they speak Spanish? They should be speaking English. They're in America. And I think Okay, that's very insensitive of us to be that way. You know, if I'm an English speaker, and it would be insensitive of somebody who's strictly speaks Spanish to think the same thing of us. Why did you learn Spanish? You know, so it goes both ways. But obviously, we just have to be sensitive to some of those things and just be kind, treat people the way that we want to be treated. And again, that example of that video at the beginning, the reason we chose that was that what was most alarming to me was this teacher talking about it took 15 minutes. And her beautiful, wonderful third grade students that she loves so much, she used words like they were horrid and they were awful and they were terrible discriminating, and it took 15 minutes. And I think we've had issues with this for years and years and years and years, going way back with the systemic racism. And we're thinking it's going to be gone tomorrow, or we should be able to fix it immediately, but so quickly we go down that slope. So it's just really, just that sensitivity.
Yeah. So even what you're saying with, I have to be selective as to which gas stations I go to, would be a very subtle form of racism, right?
Yeah.
What are just some other things that you see?
Yeah, I think two of the main ones that I've identified and can really be easily identified is place of power and place of hostility, and hostility being anger. Like, we tend to reveal a lot of our hiddenness and our ugliness when we're angry, right? Because when we're angry and we're frustrated, there's a defense mechanism that triggers in us, and the first thing we want to do is we want to preserve ourselves, but then also we want to retaliate and make the other person feel, worse off. And so a lot of times you hear those types of backlashes, those types of comments. And it's interesting because I play video games. Like, I love to play video games. My wife, if she's listening, she'd be like, amen to that, right? And boy, when guys and girls and kids get upset about what happened in the game, the amount of anger and the slur and the racial slurs that they say, I'm just like, my goodness, one, it's just a game. Two, don't somebody hear you talking? Like, where's your mama? I remember one little kid cussing like that, and I'm just, and talking about, and using different type of racial slurs. I'm like, didn't you just get out of school? Where's your parent, right? So obviously when we're frustrated and we're angry, we want to retaliate, and those types of vulgar languages comes out, and we begin to categorize people. And when they're people of minority, we use different forms of language that really hurts their character and the content of the skin, because they're not trying to attack the character. They're trying to belittle you and make you and dehumanize you with different types of language. And in place of power, I forget which president it was, but they said if you really want to test someone's character, give them power. And I've seen a lot of places where power was exercised, and in that power was so many systemic racisms, gestures, decisions that was being made. Because when you're in a place of power, you're well protected, right? And there's not really anyone to hold you accountable except you yourself. And we even if you take it outside of your own bubble and you look at it in different types of areas, you see that a lot of places where you see systemic racism is in place of power. People who have power, they have the means, they have the right, they have the money, they have the persuasion, and they exercise it. And so I think power and anger / hostility is two areas that are common.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't help, I keep thinking about a little, it's very minor, but I'm trying to figure out how to act appropriately as someone in the empowered culture. Like on Saturday, we were out doing a little shopping, and we were at this store, and there were two clerks at the store, and they were both waiting on someone, so we're on our little dot that tells us how we're socially distanced. So we're standing on our dot, and one clerk is a woman, one clerk is an African-American male. And at the same time, she says, I can help you, and he does one of these. And I'm like, which one do I go to so that I don't show preference or whatever, So I was practical and went, okay, well, there's somebody behind us, so it makes more sense for me to go to him because then they don't have to go around us. Right. So I went to him, But what would you suggest? Because I found myself in situations where I'm like, I don't know what the appropriate or best thing to do in this situation so that I don't have this automatic bias that I'm not even aware of, just kind of bleh.
Yeah.
Any ideas about that?
Yeah, I think that's difficult, right? Because like even from a narrative that a lot of businesses are pushing with a critical race theory, and like in that situation, it's called I think it's called like a race struggle or something like that. And when I think about it, it like really is self-defeating because it's making you decide between the two, right? Like and it's either the one side or the other. And I think about the many interactions with Jesus, and when he was like the instance that was when he had the adulterous woman brought to him. You know, the people, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they didn't really care about what the woman did. They used her as a way to catch or try to catch Jesus. And so they said to him, you know, the law says this, what do you say, right? And really it's just it's a lose-lose situation that they're throwing to Jesus. But what Jesus did was he threw it back on them and said, let he who is without sin be the first to cast a stone. And what that really meant was reflect on your own heart and tell me what is the best decision to be made. And so I think that's really the launching point that we can come to when we address those types of situations, is to really address your own heart and say, okay, like why do I need to, you know, ask these things? What is the best situation? How do I assess these two? And really let it be a reflection of your heart, you know, because from your standpoint, it's more easy. It's a lot easy to just go to the one who's closest or further away, so the other one that close isn't. And I really think that that's just how you have to be comfortable with your own heart. And this really is just for those who believe in a God of one, right? Like that we're all created in the image of God. I can't really speak on the secular world, but as a believer, we have to trust in the one who empowered us first and make decisions based on how the Spirit leans towards us. And that won't always be favorable in the eyes of man, because the reality is whatever decision is made will be disputed, or people will try to, you know, nitpick at it or try to judge based on what it was. But I really think it just comes from a heart, you know, a heart situation, evaluate it from a heart standpoint, not trying to use any other variables when it comes onto race, accessibility, all those things, but just really approach it from a heart, you know, a heart perspective, and just be content with that.
I think that's a great way of looking at it too, and I think I think the one thing that we need to learn through all of this too is that at least we're stopping to think about that bias, you know, instead of just letting it be there. And I think
I don't know. I wasn't proud of myself because I was like, "Ooh, am I going to be bad
But
if I
it
don't
was,
go to the black man?"
but you're thinking about it.
I couldn't tell you what her race was, but I know what his was.
Right.
So that was my struggle. Was to like, oh.
Okay, but the difference is the difference is that we don't even take the time to think about it, and we just allow us to gut react to what our bias already is. So it's that stopping of ourselves and going, okay, do I have a bias here? And even, I mean, I think we got to start somewhere, and if we don't start with that, you know, if we totally ignore that,
right? But I love the way you put that. We're going to be clunky at times.
Yeah.
And thank goodness that people like you can be gracious with us clunky people. So, yeah. That makes me feel better.
So we're clunky people. Did you get that? Did you figure that out as we kind of
But it
went
goes
in?
back to what you said. You know, I often think about people expect us to come meet them where they are, and it's got to work both ways. You know, it can't just be, well, I'm the minority, so you need to do this.
Right.
You know, I thought about something you said, Lieutenant. You said that we're supposed to have the extra thick skin, and unfortunately we are expected to do that because many times all day long we can tell you about times when people think that somehow because your skin is darker one way or the other, you're either less educated, you're less intelligent, you shouldn't be in the position that you're in. And so I think that you have to remind yourself those things all the time. I remember when I became an officer at the first company I was at, it's a big deal when you become an officer of the bank. Took me a long time, and this was someone who was a dear friend of mine. They announced him once a year. It was a really big deal. I'd been there 16 years and just became an officer. I was on top of the world. It goes to the whole company. And this was a friend of mine who said to me, he said, "Hey, I saw your name." And I said, "Yeah, wasn't that amazing? I was so excited." This was a friend of mine. And you know what he said to me? He goes, "Well, you know, they got to have so many minorities." And I remember saying, we were on the phone, and I remember saying, "Oh, that's why you thought I got promoted?" "Well, you know what I meant." And I said, "I know exactly what you meant." So in that moment, something that I had worked for 16 years to achieve in 16 seconds was, well, you know why you got the, and you know, it probably might have been right, but you don't tell someone that. And so I think that if there's any takeaway for me, it's that people do need to be mindful that their words are powerful. And I bet Lieutenant can tell you every time that he's been shown different treatment, not shown respect, not shown the dignity that he certainly is portraying here. We can remember those things, but it doesn't define who we are.
Right.
We have to keep going. And I think that that's probably been the hardest thing for me, is that sometimes you get tired of always taking the higher road. Sometimes you get tired of always having the thicker skin. People think it doesn't bother us, that it just bounces off. It sticks.
Yeah, it
I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but I know for every instance that's ever happened to me, it stuck to me.
Yeah.
Wow. And I cannot believe this, but we have 4 minutes.
What? No.
We've gotten through maybe.
We only got through 2 questions.
I know, we got through like 2 questions, but I mean,
Holy
we
cow.
could spend hours. You guys, it's just amazing, you know, just some of the things that you share. And I think the challenge for us here, at least for me, is to just continually remind myself, you know, we kind of get in this world where, oh, this is what God's kingdom looks like to me. And to me, it's this white kingdom, you know, and you go, wait a minute, but we're all missing out if we don't embrace the diversity and we embrace all of God's creation. You know, some of the verses we shared at the beginning, how amazing that is and how much fuller and richer our lives are if we're all connected like this.
Right.
You know, instead of being just, let's stick with just the people that I know, or just, you know, stay in my little circle. No, it's time for us to get out and interact and get connected to one another, because God tells us, boy, when we're in heaven, you guys, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to be with us, you know, and we're going to be side by side, and whoever else is out there, I'm sorry, but you're stuck with Tammy and I. We're going to be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see where this goes.
But,
okay.
I mean, that's the exciting thing, because then you really see a bigger picture and a truer picture of the God we serve. Because as soon as we start taking out elements of who God really is, it's a smaller picture. It's a smaller box. It's a God that doesn't exist, and we want that diversity and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have
It's
so many
just-
thoughts, and there's only 3
I
minutes.
know. There's only a few minutes
Well, one
left.
thought I had was something that I kind of stumbled across last summer, and you know, the riots that were going on in the old market, and I had a couple of African American clients, and I felt like, okay, we need to address this. We can't just pretend it isn't happening, you know. And one of them, I don't know what it was, she started talking, and I got super emotional. I found myself just feeling just so much sorrow as to everything she had gone through, and she's not emotional at all, you know. And I'm feeling myself just getting super charged, and after she left, I went into my supervisor's office, and I was like, I don't know what just happened, and she was like, Tammy, you're making this about you. And I was like, ugh. And so that's my fear, is tonight that I hope we haven't made it about us and how we can do this better. So that's bugging me right now. But I think we have to do another broadcast on this. We have to. And I'm sorry you can't come in. What? Oh, fabulous.
It'd be our first remote.
Because, yeah, we only got through 2 questions. And I was and I have so many more things that I want to talk about. But one of the things that I think I want to make sure that we leave with is that the best thing to do is to give you a voice. You have to have a voice, and you have to be heard. And that is what the empowered group, or whatever you want to call us, privileged, whatever, give us whatever label you want. But we have to give you a voice. You have to be heard, because that is where the systemic racism continues, is if you don't have a voice.
Yeah.
And so we have to do another section, because you haven't had enough of a voice tonight, I don't think. Okay, I'm feeling a little charged again.
Can you tell? Can you tell? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, again, and we knew we were going to have this with some topics, and in this one in particular, I mean, you can't do it justice. You can't cover it in an hour. But again, I hope the challenge is that it's making us all stop and think.
Yeah.
and we're starting to connect.
Thank you so
grow
much.
this. Yes,
Absolutely.
you guys
Thanks for
have
having
been
us.
so
Candidly
great.
of
for
your
doing this.
experiences.
We appreciate it so much.
Seriously, we're doing another one, so we
I'm
expect to
down.
get the
Hey,
call.
Give me
You
the
know
date.
I'm here.
Okay.
Well, and before we kind of get offline here and we get done, we do want to just kind of let you know what the next topic is coming down here in July 7th at 7 o'clock. I know Tammy, we're both super excited about it, but I'm going to let her kind of talk about our guests. We're talking about...
I get to talk about this part.
We're talking
Yay.
about sacrifice in ministry, or this idea sometimes that if we're in full-time ministry that we feel like, oh, we almost have to be a martyr for Christ. You know, if we're not giving up everything in our life and almost to the point that we are sacrificing sometimes our mental health.
And physical health.
And physical
I've seen
health,
that happen.
that, oh gosh, we're not doing ministry the way that God expected. And I don't think God, that's what he wants from us when it comes to ministry. So we've got a great...
We have exceptional, well,
Yes.
we had exceptional guests tonight.
Yes,
Thank
we've
you
had
so much.
exceptional guests
We have
every time.
Every time,
So.
yeah. Next month, we have Pastor Leroy Gerner and his wife Mildred. And Pastor Gerner is just a dear man to me. He is the director of the Corps where I work. His office is right across the hall from me, and I get a hey buddy almost every day. And he is in charge, he's the pastor of care ministries at King of Kings Church. And he and his wife have led several seminars from the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, which talks about, hey, let's be servants of God, but let's not sacrifice ourselves to the point that we fall apart either. And I know he has some good stories to tell us about that. So he and his wife are both going to join us next month, July 7th, right here, 7 o'clock, and we'd love to have you there, dear, dear people, and I just can't wait to introduce you to them.
So look forward to that. Again, if you've got some comments, if you've got questions, if you've got something to add to the dialogue tonight, email us. It'll get into my email. I'll get to check those out, or leave a comment in the Facebook comment. We'll get back to those. We'll make some replies. We appreciate you joining us this evening. And again, we'd like to thank our guests, and we look forward to seeing you all in July for the next one coming up. So thank you so much for this evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My friend,